Hello good people, this is Jason Irvin, aka the Janitor, here bringing you a quick recap video for the Computer Security Bootcamp we just did on September 5th, 2019. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the material and re-review what we've already talked about this week. The topics we covered this week included: what is information security? What are the key areas of computer security? What are your responsibilities as an information security professional? We went ahead and built your Raspberry Pi. We also installed Kali Linux on your micro SD card. We talked about what CTFs were and Wargames. We also went over what Linux is, and there were some commands that I asked you guys to go over for next week, and those commands included SSH, ls, cd, cat, file, du, and the find command. So we move on to the next page, and we were saying information security is the protection of data against unauthorized access. We kind of went over quickly how programs and applications, operating systems can be secured by passwords and encryption. We talked about physical security, where we were saying in order to protect an environment, we can have physical guards that are at the front of the building protecting the entrance coming in and out of that building. We also talked about in order to protect networks, companies employ things such as firewalls and various other network defenses that we're going to talk about throughout this course. We were talking about the key areas of information security. Those included confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, if you remember, we said it was called CIA. Those are just easy ways to remember: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, what is confidentiality? Confidentiality is making sure the information is available to only those who are authorized. So, for example, if we have a file that is only supposed to be shown to you, you're the only person that's supposed to be able to see it, we want to make sure that that file is set, the permissions are set, so that only you can see that file. Integrity is ensuring the information is accurate and is not modified by an authorized entity. And in this scenario, we said that those entities could be hackers, both good and bad. That integrity, we want to make sure that those files remain how they're supposed to remain. They're supposed to look the way they're supposed to look. When you get a document file, you don't want it changed to say something that you didn't say. If you're looking at a website, you want to make sure that that website displays exactly as you wanted it to display. We use the example that if you go to a website that sells shoes, we don't want it to then say one day that it now sells underwear. So that is keeping the integrity of the information that you're protecting. And lastly, we had availability. So availability is ensuring that the information is there when it's needed. So we were talking about having backups and making sure that we had copies of the files and data that the company needs to have, and that when it needs to be displayed, that we had the availability, we had those files available for the people when they needed them. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability, those were the key areas of information security. Moving right along, we were talking about what your responsibilities are as an information security professional. And we said that it is your responsibility to identify an asset while determining the threat, the vulnerability, and how all those come together to create a risk for the organization or the company that you're working for. So we talked about what is an asset. The asset is what you're protecting. So we use, for example, if you were protecting your Raspberry Pi, that would be the asset. For a company that you would be working for, we were talking about their computers or their network. That is the asset. Then we moved on to a threat. The threat is what or who can impact your protected environment. So in this case, we're talking about a hacker or just a bad person that wants to get into your environment. So that is a threat. We talked about the vulnerabilities, and a vulnerability is a weakness in your environment. And it doesn't have to just be the environment. It can also be in your program or in your application that that would be your asset at the time. So we were saying that having the asset, the threat, and a vulnerability, if you have all three of those, then you inherently have a risk. So a risk is when the asset, the threat, and the vulnerability intersect. Then you have a risk, and that is what you are trying to either eliminate or mitigate. If you remember, this is what we're going to be working on this entire class. This section says, what are CTFs and war games? So both of those environments, CTFs and war games, are challenging events that test various areas of information security. The difference is CTFs are time limited, where you find vulnerabilities that you can exploit, but it's mainly competitive. You're up against a time or up against other people, and you're trying to capture a flag, thus CTF, capture the flag. Remember, war games is what we're going to be starting off with. War games are very similar to CTFs. However, they do not have a time limit, and they're not particularly competitive. So they're just like CTFs, but they're not as competitive, and they usually have like levels that you have to progress through. And this is what we're going to be working on the most, are the war games instead of the CTFs, but at the end we'll be working with CTFs as well. So war games, CTFs, challenging events that test various areas of information security. So a lot of you guys knew what this was, others didn't know what this is, but our next chapter talks about what is Linux. And we said that Linux is an operating system just like Windows and Mac iOS, and some phones even run Android, which is also powered by the Linux operating system. Now, an operating system allows the user to communicate with the software and the system's hardware. So just like you have in Windows, or just like you have on a Mac, and also on your phone, they have all operating systems. Linux is just another operating system. It's open source, which means that the code for the operating system can be worked on by anyone, and it's the operating system that we're going to use for our coursework, for our entire class. Our specific version of Linux that we're going to be using is called Kali Linux. Our final area for the day was your favorite. It was commands. So these are commands in Linux that we're going to be using a lot. So that I asked you to try to memorize these and try to remember what they do, and try to make it like a game at home. So you go over what is SSH, what is LS, what is CD, what is cat, what is file, what does DU do, and what does the find command do. So going back over again, SSH is secure shell. It is a protocol that allows for secure access to a remote computer. Remember, I said we're going to be using this to actually jump into a lot of the systems that we're going to be hacking on and against. We have LS, and that lists directory contents. So LS, when you go into a folder, you type LS, and it's going to tell you the files that are in that folder. So the LS command is for that. And we talked about how that's just like in Windows or in Mac. If you have a folder that you want to get into, you double click on that folder and it shows you everything that's inside of that folder. That's what the LS command does for you at the command line. So then we have CD. CD changes directories, and that allows you to go into different areas of the file system. So of the computer, you type CD and where you want to go, and it takes you there. We talked about the cat command, or the concatenate command, cat, and we didn't go into all of its capabilities, We talked about this week using the cat command to view a file, view the contents of a file. But the cat command also allows users to create, to view, which you already know. It combines and can redirect file output. And we'll go over that in more detail throughout the course. We also talked about the file command. This determines the file type. So we talked about if you want to know if a file is a .txt file or a .zip file or a .rar file. You're going to type the file command and the name of the file, and it's going to tell you what type of file that is. We also moved into the du command, which is the disk usage, and that shows you how much space is being used by either a file or a folder. And remember, we compared this to when you look at Windows and it has that line bar and tells you how much of the disk that you're using. This command does that exact same thing. It just shows you that on the command line. And finally, we have the find command, and the find command allows you to do what? Find a file that is anywhere on the system. So these are the commands. This was the last thing we closed out for the day. I really want you guys to go through these commands because we're going to be using them heavily next week. I want to thank you all for being here for this first week, and I can't wait to get with you guys next week and see how much you've grown and show you how we're going to use everything that we've gone through this week in next week and how you're going to be using it throughout your computer security career. All right, so I'll see you guys next week, and thanks for watching.